It's time for Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast from the Fandom Podcast Network. On this show, we take an in-depth and closer look at this beloved television series, the spin-offs, the merchandise, even the fandom itself. Doctor Who's gone from homegrown family favourite to international entertainment legend and shaped the landscape of science fiction and fantasy along the way. Now step into our TARDIS and share this journey together here with us on Type 40. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Type 40 console, studio, room, whatever you want to call it, with me, Dan Hadley, Birmingham's King of the Geeks and a lifelong Doctor Who fan. Of course, just like you, I say just like you, maybe or maybe not, we are a show for everybody. There's no gatekeeping here. No gatekeeping, only conversation, fun and games and banter. Yeah, and of course, banter takes two, doesn't it? Banter takes three if you count her. Yeah, I've got to introduce our TV industry insider, professional. It can only be the one and only, completely unring modulated Simon Horton. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Dan. I haven't got my ring modulator with me, it's true. So I'm definitely unring modulated at the moment. Unless, of course, your internet connection is playing up, and then I probably will sound like I'm ring modulated.
Well, you may sound that way, but you definitely won't look that way, because here we are on video as well as audio. People can see us as well as hear us on Type 40 proper for the very first time.
Well, yeah, heaven help them. That's all I can say. Good luck.
Be careful what you wish for. Yeah, it seemed like a good idea at the time, didn't it? And this episode, this is sort of like two trips back in time rolled into one, isn't it, Simon? Because the bulk of it, we recorded it a few weeks ago now, didn't we? And it's connected specifically with one of your own, what would you call it, soapbox, hobby horse, pet?
Yeah, I think so. I'm guessing you're referring to sort of colourisation, which it's one of my little pet loves is colourisation. Simply because I just think there's so much scope with colourisation that is only really now just beginning to be explored, because previously colourisation attempts have been very, very poor. I think back to things like the Laurel and Hardy DVDs of the 90s, where they colorized them, and they're barely watchable. No, you stick with the black and white version because they just look exactly like what they are. Whereas now colorization, like so much to do with computer imagery, has come on such a long way that now it is truly viable to start experimenting with colorization. And so I'm just really interested to see how the technology develops and where we go with it. So
and
it's definitely a hobby.
As always is the case with Doctor Who fans, when any innovation comes along, our minds go straight to how it can be applied to our favourite show, doesn't it? I find that
it's difficult, isn't it? You of course it does. You can't avoid it. You're going to think about it, and I realise it's a controversial subject because there are a lot of people out there whose opinions I completely respect, that basically take the opinion of, as a purist point of view, no, it was recorded in black and white, and so that's how it should be presented. Well, I consider myself absolutely a Doctor Who purist as well, but that doesn't mean that you can't still play with the medium. Nobody's eradicating the black and white version. You're never going to replace them. None of that's going to happen. So why not have a play around the edges and just experiment with it?
And nobody could love or respect this material or the work of the professionals involved in bringing it to audiences in the first place more than our guest on this show this time. We spoke to Richard Tipple of the group Doctor Who, didn't we? He came on and he was generous enough to not just give us his time, but to share some images with us. Some of them are exclusive and from his own sort of private collection and his day-to-day life, because the man is, I don't think he'll get angry with me for saying this, he's pretty much obsessed with Daleks. And so he shared some other pictures with us too. And so we felt that it would be such a waste if we didn't share those with our audience and make the video content to match the audio and just push things out a little bit like that. It also gives everybody out there a chance, the people who haven't seen our Type Over 40 videos that we do for the Spacebook channel, where Rosie is the house Dalek. Anybody who hasn't seen those, you'll be seeing Rosie here for the first time. She doesn't say a great deal. She's very shy, but that yellow eye of hers is all seeing, all watching. She's here to keep an eye on my toxic masculinity. But yeah, doesn't take up much room. It's fine. It's fine by me. And yeah, this, as I said, this is an experimental episode for us, but we won't keep you waiting too long for all the good stuff. But I have got to, as usual, run through a few of our fixed points that we have to remind everybody of as part of the Fandom Podcast Network. Each and every edition of this show, past, present, and future, is easily found on the FPNet master feed at fpnet.podbean.com and FPNet on the Podbean app. The Fandom Podcast Network can also be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and streaming on iHeart Radio, that popular podcast streaming platform. And whichever of those you're listening to us on, you can let us know what you think of it all through our social media presence. That's Instagram and Twitter at Type 40 Doctor Who. And there's a Type 40 Facebook group, of course, which is full of companions and friends of all generations from all over the world. Colourful chat, equally colourful characters and viewpoints. There are links to all of that in our show notes, as always. And yeah, there's barely a day goes by in the Doctor Who, the Type 40 Doctor Who group, or any place where Doctor Who fans sort of convene to chat and share. There's barely a day goes by without a Dalek picture isn't shared, is there? If it's not a Dalek itself, it's a Dalek toy or T-shirt or whatever else. They are omnipresent, aren't they? An integral part of Doctor Who. And these 60 serials in which they first appeared are rightly sort of treasured and revered, and they're some of the series' most groundbreaking, aren't they, Simon? Simply because Dalek Mania was a thing. It's not just an expression. It was a pop culture revolution. Is that overstating it?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's overstating it at all. I mean, you know, this has been talked about in the past, but I really think it is genuinely true that if it wasn't for the Daleks, you and I would not be sitting here today to talk about Doctor Who. She certainly wouldn't. And yeah, I genuinely think there is a case for the fact that Doctor Who wouldn't have survived beyond however many episodes. I think there was an original run, was there, of about 12, 13 episodes, something like that. And that's not to denigrate anything that Warris Hussein, William Hartnell, Verity Lambert. It's not to denigrate anything that they had done. Doctor Who still deserved to be a success purely on the strength of that first 4-part story. But had it not been for the Daleks literally exploding Doctor Who into the zeitgeist, into pop culture, it could well be that it might have just trundled along for a few episodes, maybe even 2 or 3 years, and then it would have just drifted away. It will be fondly remembered, as we fondly remember a lot of programs, but it was the Daleks, without any doubt, that sealed the success of Doctor Who and literally pushed it into the stratosphere. And it's still doing so today.
There's probably nothing more ambitious than a 3-month story, is there? 12-week Doctor Who story, the Dalek Master Plan. And to attempt something like, although it was the work of 2 writers, wasn't it? It was still, and heaven knows how many professionals, technicians, and prop builders, actors, you know, the cast did sort of change and roll and grow and shrink over that period of time. It was incredibly ambitious, and obviously the fact that it doesn't exist in its entirety is, as with a lot of 60s Doctor Who, you know, it still hurts. It's a real sort of pang. But what does still exist is sort of fertile ground, really, for people such as our guest on this particular show to sort of put that affection, to pour it back into it, and continue to innovate and to play and to bring new life to it all and to them. I think we'd best get on with the show and our interview with Richard Tipple from Doctor Who right now. Check it out. With Simon and I this time is colourisation artist, and it's safe to say a pretty big Doctor Who fan, Richard Tipple. Richard, welcome to Type 40.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for agreeing to talk to us. We're going to sort of gradually explain who you are and why you're here and what you're here to talk about, but just to sort of lay the land a little bit, because the fandom and even the BBC itself has spent decades, hasn't it, retrieving, restoring and representing the classic era of Doctor Who, hasn't it? Particularly the episodes made during the 1960s for several decades now, and in new and innovative ways that move with the times, sometimes in small and obvious ways, in representing lost stories, bringing them to print and audio and things like that in the best way that they can, or in other ways, just making the existing episodes look their very best and to future-proof them for future generations and the increasingly sophisticated ways and devices that we view them on. We have flat screens that are probably the size of an entire wall of the studio of Lime Grove back in the 60s, I would say.
No
and
doubt.
of course all the devices that we have in our hands now. But you have gone pretty next level, or even the level above that, haven't you? So what exactly have you done, Richard? What's going on?
Well, I, as part of a team, definitely say that as part of the team, have added colour to a 60s episode of Doctor Who that was shot in black and white.
And what was it made you do that in the first place, Richard? What did you just wake up one morning and think, you know what I'm going to do here? What sparked you off?
I think I was getting increasingly annoyed with the number of people that wouldn't give 60s Doctor Who a chance, because I kept, I love it. I just think for me it's the best era of the show, the 60s. Like the Hartnell and Troughton are just brilliant. The ideas are fantastic. They're not always realised to the highest production standards, but there's an energy and a joy to the 60s Doctor Who and a magic to it that I haven't really seen in other eras in the same way. And I just
and
thought...
this is before your time, isn't it, Richard?
Yeah. It's slightly before my time. I was born in '86, so it's.
We feel very old now, don't we, Dan?
Bloody hell!
We were still watching. We were watching Trial of a Time Lord go out live in 1986, but there we go.
Yeah. So I missed out on that experience, unfortunately. But yeah, I just thought it would be really good to do something to try and open up this amazing era to people who perhaps in the younger generation that aren't just will totally switch off to anything black and white. So I kind of toyed around with it. I started trying to learn how that process works. There's not that many good tutorials online to do it, so it took an awful lot of trial and error, an awful lot of just the worst skin tones I've ever seen, just trying to get it right. But you improve slowly. What happened is I put a couple of videos online. I colorized the speech at the end of the Dalek invasion of Earth, the "One Day I Shall Come Back" speech, and stuck it on YouTube, and ended up getting about 100,000 hits or something stupid like that. And
that's about 30 to 45 seconds, isn't it?
Yeah, it was quite a long one, and I did all the bits outside, and then I got told off for making the monitor in the TARDIS in colour, which I thought was a brilliant Doctor Who comment. I look back at that now. That was something I made 6-7 years ago, and I can't watch it. It's awful. And I do kind of want to take it down, but I'm just kind of leaving it up there for like prosperity's sake. But it's got to a point where I kept improving, but no one really saw my work for 6 years because
6 years.
I was so focused on getting this project done. Yeah, I couldn't. I work with a team of people, and they're so talented and they're so brilliant. One of them, Kieran, he's able to do little clips of other videos in the meantime and put them up, you know, and I don't know how he does it. I'm in complete awe of his ability to do that. For me, it's I've got to plug myself into the Matrix. I've just got to work.
Well, to put this in perspective, because what you're talking about that speech with Hartnell, the set running to certainly less than a minute, what you've achieved with this is a full episode, a full black and white episode of Doctor Who, completely colourised. I hadn't heard even a whisper of this. I'd seen videos on YouTube and things like that. I would imagine you have as well, Simon. And I've watched the odd one here and there. Like you say, some are obviously better than others, but they've all impressed me in one way or another. But when my ears really pricked up was when I heard about Gallifrey One. It's the biggest event in the Doctor Who calendar, isn't it? The Doctor Who Fandom calendar, and that's where you unveiled this really, really ambitious project, isn't it? And when I read about it, I had to go back and reread. I think it was an article on the fan site. I had to go back and read it. This is a full episode. What this is? No, a full. This is a full episode. I couldn't quite get my head around it. So yeah, I was going to ask you this: how long would something like that take you? Has it been that entire 6 years?
Yeah, well, in that time, I've had a lot of life changes. You know, I'm God knows how much things I've done. I moved house, got married, had children, done all that sort of kind of life stuff. So I haven't been able to kind of sit down and do it kind of non-stop. Although there was actually a period when my wife was in labour in hospital, and I had a laptop on my lap, and I was just trying to get Hartnell's kind of eyes right.
Now that's a true geek. Total respect to you. Total respect. I'm sure there wasn't much respect from your wife, but never mind.
It was quite
labour in different ways.
The wailing was quite distracting at times, but we came to a compromise. But yeah, it was that was just. But it's taken 6 years, but that's because I started this project on my own. And it took me a long time to realise there was no way I was going to finish it without a team, a really, really good team around me.
And so how does that team work? Is it a case that you are in overall charge and you sort of divvy work up amongst other people, or you all work together? How does the teamwork thing work then?
I'm sort of leading it just because I started the project, really.
And
there's
so do
four of us.
And they each have you divvied it up in that each of you take certain scenes or certain characters, or what happens there then?
Absolutely, yeah. So I was sort of the key decision maker. So if there was a impasse and we couldn't vote on what sort of decision to make on what colour we wanted something to be, or this, that, or the other, then I would have the deciding vote. But essentially, that was just a way to help things move forward if we needed it to. But we all had our very own kind of roles, and it was very much a collaboration between things. So I can't think of many shots that I 100% owned. You know, I would do a little bit, I'd then send it to Scott, who would do a little bit more. Kieran would then change it, send it back. Justin would feedback on what was working and what wasn't working. So it was a real kind of like ensemble, really. It was a bit of a process. In terms of like how we shaped that, so we used a combination really of After Effects and a Photoshop, and played to our strengths. So Kieran and I are After Effects whizzes. That's the program we like to use, whereas Justin and Scott use Photoshop. Both perfectly good programs, both have their plus sides and their downsides. So it was actually, I think, kind of perfect that 50% of the team used one and 50% of the team used the other, and it gave us a kind of nice working dynamic.
But the two programs are still compatible, are they? In that, in effect, both of those programs give a similar result. In that, somebody sitting there watching it wouldn't be able to tell the difference between what's been photoshopped and what's been After Effects.
No, absolutely not. And because we were passing things from one program to the next all the way, it would be absolutely impossible. And shots had, you know, a shot that started in Photoshop might then be finished in After Effects. You know, there was absolutely no way. You know, there was no problem switching between things. You know, it was just a case of getting the whole film, breaking it into shots, assigning a shot to a person, and then we created a sort of a set of characters and a set of colours we wanted for each of those characters. So each delegate had a cheat sheet. Each character had a cheat sheet. The Dalek and the Dalek Supreme had one, and then we had ones for the sets as well. So most of the stuff in the main room with the big kind of horseshoe tables and Mavic Chen and everything, I did most of those sets. Hallways and things, and jungle was nearly all Kieran, and that's kind of like, so we had our own sort of areas, but we passed things across as well. It helped us keep a bit of consistency that way. and then the colour decisions are obviously based on either references or our own sort of interpretation.
It reminds me of various conversations I've seen with the guys at the team who are putting together the animations, the animated reconstructions.
Yeah.
How they have assets for different characters and for the locations and things like that.
Yeah.
And as you say, the colour palettes and whatnot. So it's sort of in the same family of skills and workflow and practice to make sure that you get a consistent result. And as you were saying, to aid the communication between the team.
Yeah, and actually it's really important to say that I reckon, I'd check this with Kieran, but I reckon we probably did 40% of the project in the last 6 months.
Wow, so the pace really picked up. Once you started to get into the swing of it, it was when a lot of credit to Justin, really. He really sort of helped us implement a bit of a system. And when we got ourselves organised and we started uploading stuff, and because someone else had uploaded something, you didn't want to be kept behind, so then you would kind of get your stuff done, and it sort of just powered the whole thing through. And of course, as we went, we developed new ways of working and better technology that could kind of work for us a little bit. It was a hard slog, but we got there, and it was an amazing feeling. Those last few weeks when you know you're going to finish it, it was absolutely incredible. Did you always intend to do the full episode, or did you kind of start just think, let's just dabble into this, and never expecting to do full 25 minutes, or was the intention always to do the whole lot?
Always to do the whole lot, which is why I picked that episode. Just because, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to do an episode that I felt would talk to viewers that wouldn't normally give 60s Doctor Who a go. So I think if I'd colourised an episode of the Censorites or something, like it might not have had the same. I love it, but it probably didn't have the pace that people might expect.
There's a lot going on in this, isn't there, in Day of Armageddon?
It's incredible. There's loads, and you've got jungles being burnt down, you've got alien delegates, you've got all sorts of kind of underhand dealings going on. It's very exciting. There's a lot of kind of big things happening. There's a fantastic set piece at the end.
Let's just put this into perspective for some of those listening who may not be quite so familiar with 1960s Doctor Who. Day of Armageddon was the second episode of the legendary 12-week Dalek Master Plan story. It was originally transmitted on the 20th of November 1965, so it's just as the series was clocking up its second birthday. Starred William Hartnell as the Doctor, of course, with Peter Purvis as Stephen. And this is the only surviving episode to feature Adrian Hill as Katarina, the short-lived companion. But it also has in its cast familiar Doctor Who names, Kevin Stoney and Nicholas Courtney, in a part other than what he's most associated with. So that's another fascinating fact about this one. And as such, being an early Dalek story, it was written by Terry Nation, and it's one of the earliest episodes directed by Douglas Camfield too, isn't it? The one of Doctor Who's most celebrated directors, I think, to this
Camfield's
day.
A genius, yeah. Yeah, I love his work. I'm a huge fan of Camfield like that. I don't think any other director would have got that shot of Maverick Chen behind the bars. That just feels so Camfield. Like, it is absolutely amazing. The fluidity of his camera work is always so exciting. He makes those tiny cramped sets feel so much bigger than they probably were in reality. And yeah, you've mentioned a few names there. Like, how could I not want to work on an episode that had the First Doctor and Nick Courtney, Kevin Stoney, Daleks, alien delegates, like flamethrowers? It's so exciting. It's such a brilliant episode. I think the only one that would trump it if it existed is probably the final part.
And I think you're right, Richard. And the thing is about the Daleks Master Plan, it's just always had that aura amongst Doctor Who fans. It is kind of one of those lost gems that we've got those tantalising glimpses of the odd few episodes that exist of it, and because of its reputation as the 12-parter, it's a formidable legacy behind it, and it's one of those things that how can you not be excited by 12 episodes of Daleks and time destructors and secret space security? It's almost like sort of the most quintessential Doctor Who story you can possibly imagine.
It really
certainly
is.
Certainly the most Dalek-y story you can imagine.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's the holy grail for me, that and Marco Polo. What I'd give to sit down and be able to watch them.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Richard, because I agree with you. Marco Polo is certainly, of all of the missing William Hartnell stories, that's the one I would love to see more than any other, is Marco Polo. And I was interested in your decision to do Day of Armageddon because, for example, had you taken something like Marco Polo, in many ways, I suspect it probably would have taken you actually a lot longer to have done Marco Polo, simply because, if anything, there is so much more colour and detail within Marco Polo. So, whereas, as fantastic as Day of Armageddon is, it's quite limited in its palette. You know, you've got those Daleks, we know what colour the Daleks are, you've got jungles that are all going to be green, you've got flames that are all going to be red and yellow. Whereas you look at something like Marco Polo, and the costumes and the sets in that, we know from the reference photos that exist, are literally stunning. Was there ever a temptation to maybe say, do you know what, let's just try something like the Aztecs that has got a similar level of detail in the costume and the sets? Was there a temptation to do that?
Yeah, there was definitely, like, early doors. I knew I needed to do an episode that I could watch thousands of times. I really love the Aztecs. It's a brilliant story. I just felt the excitement and the pace of Master Plan 2 pipped it. Also, I kind of wanted to do a story because I could, I planned to do one episode. I didn't want to do something and then people sort of fold their arms and go, all right, now do the other 3 episodes. Which is exactly, by the way, what's happened.
Are you saying that Doctor Who fans are difficult to please?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is the thing. It's when you're working on a project that's this labour intensive, regardless of the place of love that it came from, it becomes a task, doesn't it? A project is a project, and the material is the material, and obviously you're approaching this with a not only a sense of respect for the history of it, but with an end result, a goal cited. And so you've almost got to distance yourself, haven't you, be able to distance yourself from certainly the narrative, and even the fan part of you up to a point. When it came to begin the project, taking that original footage, because obviously, the BBC, the restoration team, is working on these things, it seems, all of the time. We're now getting them represented for us for HD. Did you have to do anything to the raw footage, that original black and white footage, just to make it suitable for the process that you were going to take it through?
Yeah, so colourisation for me is only as good as the base that it sits on. It's very frustrating to just fix the base and make sure the film print is exactly as good as it can be, because you want to get your crayons out and start colouring in. That's like, you want to get on with it. You just want to start seeing a difference.
It's not quite as simple as just daubing on screen caps, is it?
I really wish it was. No, unfortunately, like, we had to do the hard stuff. Scott, part of our team, he is a genius at restoration. You may have seen some of his clips on Twitter where he's taken the 8mm off-screen footage that survives from Australia, I think, from certain episodes, and he's nearly removed all of the banding from it, and he's upscaled it, and it just looks like 16mm film. It's absolutely incredible. So we harnessed his skill set, not just his amazing colorization skills, but also his, the way he can clean up a print. So even if you hate colorization, I would probably want to get a copy of this episode and then desaturate it and watch it again, because it is a vast improvement on what was done for the Lost in Time DVD, which I think was probably just had to be done and out the door. And they've definitely done a lot to it. The restoration team are geniuses. The love that they put into those projects, they would not have had 6 years to tamper with it and fix every single frame they could, which is essentially what we did. We've given it an unbelievable wash. I think the noise that we've reduced, we've got rid of the burnt out highlights, we've added details into the kind of the crushed black areas. We really have done a huge amount to it. We've rebuilt the title, so that's something I did, when Hartnell goes through
rebuilt the titles.
Yeah. So when Hartnell kind of goes through the leaves at the front, and you see him peering over, and it says "Day of Armageddon" flashes up. I literally removed that text and created a mask of Hartnell's face and tracked it to him on top, and then I created the text "Day of Armageddon" again in the right font and overlaid it in exactly the right place, and then colorized it all so that we were colorized. What we've done is we've just tried to create it exactly how it would have been, or they would have wanted it to be seen, using that as our sort of guide stick of what was acceptable restoration and what wasn't acceptable restoration, which is always going to divide people, by the way. Most people would never have spotted it, but you see a stagehand for about a second while Maverick Chen is talking. He disappears behind a chair. We removed him.
Whoa, you'll get into trouble for that one.
Well, bring it on.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. I think with things like that, I've been recently watching the season 10 box set with the Green Death, and I'd never noticed it before until it gets because you can't miss it in HD. When one of the miners down in the mine is about to do their line, and there is a hand in the corner that does a cue, and it's so obvious now. And I'm thinking, gosh, why didn't as the restorers? I would have just removed it and
fixed
be
it.
damned, you know.
Yeah.
Because they would never have wanted that to have been seen in a million years, would they, Richard?
There's a smoke overlay that they badly put on over one of the shots, and we ummed and ahed about replacing that for ages, but in the end we decided not to, because that felt kind of authentic. You know, okay, they'd got it wrong, but they had put smoke in there. It just wasn't as good as we could achieve today. I didn't feel like that was something that was right to fix. But a stagehand being in shot that shouldn't have been, I feel like the titles being really bleached out and leaky simply because this is probably a tele-recording shot of the wall and not the master print. That was probably right to fix as well. So it was sort of making those sort of judgment calls as we went. You know, we did treat it with a huge amount of respect.
But I mean, actually, what you've done there is certainly, as far as, for example, of replacing the title, is exactly what the restoration team are doing on all the on the Blu-ray releases. Anyway, every one of those gets they start with the clean title sequence and the clean credit sequence, and they overlay brand new titles over them. So you're doing exactly the same thing there. With something like that, is there a temptation while you were doing this? Is there a temptation to almost go too far? Is it difficult because you weren't actually constrained by budget or time at all? Is it almost difficult to know quite when to stop?
Yes.
I'm guessing it's one of those things where you could carry on working this for probably another 10, 20 years time and keep on tweaking it.
There's two things that probably a third. There's a moment with the bad smoke overlay where the doctor goes, look, you know, and they all look off into the distance. And I'm certain there should have been a shot cut in there that wasn't on the day. I'm sure they had a burning set or something that they just forgot to queue up. So there was
ran out of time.
Yeah, or they just ran out of time. There was the temptation. It would have been kind of unforgivable. Also, I thought I could recreate that set and I could set fire to it and I could cut that shot in. And then I thought, like, too much. And then there's a moment where this Dalek comes up to the Supreme and just sort of goes, Zephon. And then the Supreme replies. And we debated for ages whether we should replace that line with something that, you know, Zephon isn't here or Zephon is missing, or something that I felt was supposed to be there but was probably missed by kind of, you know, the artist at the time. But in the end, I ended up getting the scripts out, having a look through, and it just says ... Zephon ? So I thought, right, well, it's got to stay then, because that was what was written in the script. It wasn't a production error. You know, there was stuff like that. I did remove a camera as well. When the Daleks are shifting around the TARDIS, you see a camera go into the bottom right of frame. And I removed that by rebuilding the back half of a Dalek and tracking it to the front half, so it sort of covers it. I don't think you'd see it, but I felt like, well, that camera obviously wasn't supposed to be in shot.
I think in many ways with anything like this, I think you're making the right decisions there, because the way I look at this is I am, on the one hand, I'm absolutely a purist. You know, I adore Doctor Who in its most pure form, but on the other hand, I'm also very much in favour of, look, if things can be improved, let's improve them. That's not to do away with the original document that you had there. But what you're doing, in effect, is, look, this story wasn't colorized to begin with. So what you're doing is you're creating something that never existed in the first place anyway. So why not tweak with it? In effect, I would see this as a kind of, in inverted commas, a special edition of Day of Armageddon. And I think as long as people look at it in that way, it's only the same as what they're doing on the Blu-rays with computer graphics, and they do tweaks with those. And I support it, because whether you like them or not, it's just an alternative version. It is kind of just a special edition. It's just a different version of it. It's not replacing or even improving on the original. It's just presenting it in a different form. There's nothing wrong with that. I think you should be doing these changes as you're going through, colorizing and creating something that didn't exist anyway. Nothing wrong with that.
I totally agree. I think we were just trying to walk a very sensitive line between enhancement, which we were going to do anyway, because we were going to clean up this print, we were going to restore the titles, we were going to make the audio better, we were going to make sure the sound of the sting actually hits when the title appears like it was supposed to. You know, all of those. We've restored the sound, we've restored the picture, but then we have a decision on, okay, what about enhancements? We're naturally enhancing it, in my opinion, by adding color anyway. So it's a very delicate kind of balance, and whatever we did, we really thought about. So I'm quite comfortable with where we're at with it, and I know there'll be people that like that sort of stuff, and I know there'll be people that don't, and yeah, that's fine. That's the nature of the beast.
No, I was just going to say, I'm guessing an equally fine line to walk is the decision on what you actually do with the colour, in that there is a temptation. Once you start colourising something, if you're going to colorise it, you can go mad if you want to. If you're going to start colourising anyway, you could use every colour available to you. Again, is there a temptation with these to go, for want of a better word, more garish, or more muted? Or, you know, how did you find the level for that?
That's hard, because that's sort of just your own sort of artistic take on it. So we wanted it to be as realistic as possible, but also as kind of an artist, you'd have a certain way of doing it. I'm quite glad, like Kieran and I, our styles very much align. We like to colorize 60s stuff in a slightly more sort of technicolor way, because when I think of stuff that's shot in the 60s, it's always brighter and bolder and more saturated and exciting. Whereas, you know, Justin and Scott are completely the other way. You know, when they do their skin tones and stuff, it's a lot more blue, it's a lot more gritty, and it's a lot more realistic. And actually, I think it balanced out quite well for us. We strive to go for the most realistic possible.
When you see pictures, still images, either from Doctor Who itself or when people working on the production have taken pictures from behind the scenes, they're in colour. You never see a colour picture of Doctor Who from back in this era where it isn't like that, where the colours of the era and the trends of the era. You never see one and you think, oh, that looks really grey and washed out.
There's two reasons. There's two reasons for that. That's the film stock they're using and the amount of light that they put onto those sets. When we started adding colour and we're using those photos as colour references, we're essentially using basically this, we've got the same sort of film stock in front of us, so it makes sense to sort of match those looks. You know, we didn't want to make something that didn't feel part of the era. Like I said, we wanted to make something that looked like it was shot in 1965 in colour.
One of the things that I always get sort of picked up on, because as Dan well knows, and this is why I'm so pleased to be talking to you today, because I'm such a huge advocate of colourising old 1960s Doctor Who. It's something that I've been really championing and fighting for so long. And one of the things that I always get, the naysayers might say to you is you know, oh, you can't colorise them because we haven't got colour reference photos for everything that exists. So you're then going to be making a call on what you colorise it, and thus it's not justified. And one of the things that people always come to me and say, well, you can't colorise because what colour are you going to do the TARDIS console when you colorise these episodes? And I know exactly what colour I would do it. I'm interested before I give my answer. What colour would you do the TARDIS console if in a 60s Doctor Who episode?
I'd do it green.
Oh, thank you, Richard. Thank you. It's not rocket science. The console is green. Well, I don't understand why people have such a problem with this. The console is pale green. That's what colour it is throughout the early John Pertwee years. Thus, it's pale green.
I see no argument for that. I think Kieran has done stuff and he's done it green, and he's done a few where he's done it white as well, and it does look fantastic. But for me personally, it's green. We didn't have to have that argument, thankfully, on this. No. But I think he would agree. I think if we took a vote, we would do it green because that's the colour it was, and actually it looks utterly beautiful in green. I think a kind of that. It's not lurid, horrible swamp colour. It's a very beautiful mint, and and it's got all the lovely red dials and all of that sort of stuff going on, and lights flashing, and and the time rotor going up and down and spinning around. Like, it's an absolute thing of beauty. Like, you don't need to change anything about it.
It is. I agree. I love the green colour. In as far as I'm concerned, in my mind, that console throughout those years is green because it is green. I know that it was meant to be. They did it green, so it looked white. In effect, I don't care about that. It's a green console. And
well, the argument one of my team might put forward to me is we want to do this how it was supposed to look, and if it was supposed to look white, then there's an argument for that. So I would do it green, but I would also take a vote on it.
I can guarantee that whatever you did, there would be people that would moan either way.
Listen,
it's hard to please Doctor Who fans. We know we're all Doctor Who fans. We'd all say this. We're a very difficult bunch to please.
And Simon's been, as he said, he's been talking about this for quite some time, and he's been gradually sort of changing my mind about it because I was one of these people.
It, weren't you? Yeah.
The thought of recolorization. I will. I'll hold my hands up. The thought of recolorization. I wouldn't say it filled me with dread, but it used to leave me cold. I think, well, why these things were made and shown in black and white, that's how I've always watched them, that's how I enjoy them, and that's their little world. And, black and white cinema's got a whole other language in some instances. Some great
totally
filmmakers made specifically. And even now, people do make film in black and white for very specific reasons. At the end of the day, what I've come to think, and through conversations with Simon, is that this was populist television and it was about moving with the times. And so I've sort of had a bit of a change of heart, and particularly since going onto YouTube, because some of the colorization attempts, and this is not a knock on anybody and their hard work and TLC and devotion to Doctor Who, but they just used to leave me cold and switch me off further. And things from years ago, like the attempts to colorise Laurel and Hardy movies, for example, which just...
They looked awful, though. They looked terrible, Laurel and
Hardy's. I think from hearing you talk about this, Richard, and the Simon's questions there, and how you've responded, I think the fact is that they weren't using those same restraints or that same sensibility and sensitivity. Was never really. It was more a case of, look at what we can do, rather than reining it in any way.
I think when that technology first sort of appeared in the 80s, I think it was just the pure excitement that that's something they could do. I'd probably watch it out of interest, but if Citizen Kane belongs in black and white, right? But something that was made in the 1960s for children, that isn't high art. That's that, and if we love it, right? We love it, but this is something that they threw together. And if they had the money, they would have shot it in colour, but they didn't. It was a financial restraint. So Hartnell has been on record himself saying he would have loved to have seen the show in colour. I think if they'd had the financial resources, technology available, they 100% would have done that, but they didn't. It was a very quick, relatively cheap program to put together.
That's always been my justification as well. If they could have made it, they just happened to have black and white cameras. If they could have done, they would have made it in colour. It's as simple as that. And you can see from those reference photos they've got, they thought so carefully about colour. Everything was designed in colour. This is the bizarre thing. Everything was designed with the most fantastic colours in Doctor Who in the 60s.
Look at Marco Polo.
Absolutely.
Look at those sets. And Marco Polo had been available to colorise.
You might have been tempted to go for that one.
Actually, I think I would have been tempted to avoid it like the plague, despite the unbelievably beautiful colours. There's that's not to say there's not a huge amount of detail in Jungle. There's a huge amount. We looked at Planet of the Daleks for all of that sort of stuff. Even stuff that looks relatively flat and whatever, it's got a huge amount of different colour hues and stuff going on. But to do a really intricate woven background, and to do all those amazing sets, a few wide shots of the Gobi Desert aren't going to make up for the hours and hours and hours of intricate kind of curtains, that's going to need to be done on Marco Polo.
What's totally swung me round to this now, when we were talking about getting together and having a chat with you, you sent along some still images from this production and the trailer, because I'd heard about it and I'd seen photographs taken from the convention floor at Gallifrey One. But until you sent these stills along, I don't think I really appreciated the full extent of the effect, the artistry, and how convincing, how tight it is, how colourful Yeah, that sounds obvious, but really, there's less compromise here than I've ever seen before.
There's no compromise.
I can believe that. Certainly, by the time I'd watched the trailer that you sent along to me, I was convinced that was meant to be in colour, and all those arguments that Simon has been putting for so long is completely. I'm there. I'm on it. I get it. I understand now.
I love hearing that. You don't know how happy that makes me because, I think those Laurel and Hardys you refer to, they're so problematic. Colorization is really, really, really hard, and it takes an exceptionally long time to do a very small amount. So people cut corners often. They use kind of automation where they shouldn't. They do things to try and speed it up, and that I can see why. But ultimately, we're always sacrificing something when you do that. A lot of people in their heads, when they think of colorization, they think of those awful kind of watercolor washes over people's faces and backgrounds and whatever, and
I did
things that kind of just randomly masks that sort of just don't quite move with the everybody on screen and all of that sort of stuff. It's such a problem because that's how people view colorization, and unfortunately there's still people out there putting up stuff which isn't quite at a sort of hyper real level. I think it's very easy to churn out a lot quickly. So when you see these things appearing all the time, you think, well, that's what colorization looks like, rather than, the one project that maybe comes around every 6 years or so that takes a lot longer to do. You get a much more kind of realistic look.
But Dan's correct. I mean, those photos are absolutely stunning. The screenshots we've got from Day of Armageddon are stunning. I mean, the Daleks just look beautiful. They're my favourite Daleks of all Daleks. Those blue hemisphere ones, and the way you've rendered them, it's magnificent. I just can't wait to see this episode in its entirety.
The Daleks were my job. I have an unbelievable level of patience when it comes to colouring hemispheres.
As luck would have it.
As a Dalek moves, they're not perfectly circle. You can't track those things. They sort of warp and change depending on there's 56 of them. They go in all sorts of weird motions and what have you. I love the Master Plan Daleks. They are the best Daleks in existence.
Yeah,
I have
agree.
a full-size Master Plan Dalek in my
Really?
conservatory, which I'm very, very grateful to own. And in my brother's garage, I'm building a Dalek Supreme from Master Plan as well.
Whoa, fantastic!
If we ask Richard very, very nicely, he might take a photograph of that.
I do hope so. I really want to see this photo of the Dalek. Definitely.
I'll send you my work in progress and my finished Dalek as well. And you can have a good look. It was very helpful for colour references, especially in different lighting.
Can't wait to see those.
No problem.
I'm fascinated by the idea that this. You talked about it right at the beginning of our conversation. You talked about marketability, really. We talked just about those Laurel and Hardys, for example, at the dawn of colorization. That was done so they could market the same material over and over again and sell it back to television, wasn't it? To make it viable for people to watch in the age of the TV in the 70s and 80s. The very first thing that you mentioned when we started speaking was how frustrated you were that people would just discount the classic era, the 60s era, because it was in black and white. And here is a way, not the only way, but certainly a way to get those eyes on the screen, to get those people invested in these wonderful stories that are just as engaging and nuanced and timeless as anything that's been produced in the decades in between. I mean, I just think it's the most incredible achievement. 6 years. What's 6 years for an achievement like that? Obviously, people want to see this. Simon's chomping at the bit to see it all. So am I. The reception at Gallifrey One. Were you there for it?
No, I couldn't fly over. I just couldn't justify it. But Kieran did fly over, and he did a quick Q&A with the brilliant Gary Russell. Was really kind to him and asked him some really good questions. And I think it's about 1,000 people in the room. And then they played the episode, and we're having a UK premiere soon, coronavirus depending,
yes,
which is hopefully it's a fundraiser actually for the Australian bushfires. So it's slightly ironic that I've got an episode full of jungle being set fire to, but hopefully it will help raise a lot of money for a really good cause.
That's brilliant. Well done. Excellent.
What's the event called again, and what's the charity that people can give to if they wish?
It's for Good Day of the Doctor. If you have a look on Twitter, on their Twitter feed, there's all the information there where the money's going, but it's going for the Australian bushfire fundraiser. A good old Peter P will be there as well, next to me.
Perfect.
I will get to shake the man's hand and show him my episode of
brilliant
65 Doctor Who. So that's exciting.
It sounds like this has been a really, not only a big chunk of your life, but a really steep learning curve. And but you must have some. Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine that the technology that you've used, how that's evolved in the last 5 to 6 years from when you started the project to complete it. You said you'd done over 40% of it just in the last few months. Yeah. But you must have, as a colourisation artist, though, you must have some idea of other things you'd like to work on, being that the reception has been generally good. So what are your plans for the short or long-term future? Have you considered anything yet?
Yeah, we're definitely considering stuff. Like, I think we all want to do another one. I think that's kind of clear. Now we've got a really good way of working, and we've got loads of kind of...
You weren't just glad to see the back of it then?
No, I'm really glad we did it. It was a really good achievement. People have been really kind about it. It got to a point where, after that sort of time, I was revisiting stuff that I'd made 6 years previously, and I was just having to redo it because it just was nowhere near the standard we needed it to be. So it was, we tried to get everything up to the right level. It was a really tough slog, but we got there and we learned a lot, and it sort of feels like it might be a waste if we just walked away now and said, well, we did it. It's, we wanted to be the first people to colourize an entire episode of Black and White Doctor Who. High fives all round. See you later. I feel like we've learned too much. We've got a load of momentum behind us. People have been overwhelmingly kind about the episode. When they saw it at Gallifrey One, like, my Twitter feed just lit up with just really lovely comments, which obviously being the world, after kind of you hold something so closely and you think, oh my God, are people just going to hate it? But people have been really kind and really nice. Pleased. Hopefully, once we've all had a really good rest, we're going to maybe pick up another episode and see where we go. Lastly,
I have to ask the obvious question. How does the BBC feel about projects like this? Are they aware of your work? Have you had any sort of nods of approval and acknowledgement from them? Because it must be a fine line you've got to walk. It's
an incredibly fine line. So even when this was being kind of shown at Galley One, we made sure we got a kind of a nod that might be okay. It's really tricky, obviously, because we don't own Doctor Who. We own maybe the colour in this particular version that we've created, but we in no way own Doctor Who. And as much as I want this to go to a really wide audience, and I'd love everyone to enjoy it, I'm not just going to upload it to YouTube or Vimeo or anything like that. Even when we showed it at Galley One, it travelled in person with Kieran on a hard drive, but just because we can't risk it leaking. It would not only be a shame because the quality of what YouTube would probably do to it in its compression would break my heart, but there's a huge probably kind of legal ramifications of doing that, and we don't want to upset the BBC at all. It's their product. Ideally, I'd like to work with them one day to maybe do an episode, but we'll have to see. They obviously haven't officially endorsed it, but who knows? They have been kind enough to let us screen it at Galley. From that point of view, we're good. We'll just make sure we keep getting permission as we go, and who knows, maybe they'll animate Master Plan, and it could be a rather nifty extra on there or something.
Dan knows that I've been sort of championing this, as I say, for so long, and we've been talking about so many times on these podcasts about the Blu-ray box sets, and so many times I constantly keep saying, when they start doing the Doctor Who from the 60s, the black and white box sets, they have to colourize one story in the way that they've been doing CGI effects on one story in the colour box sets. They've just got to colourize one black and white story in each of these box sets from William Horton and Patrick Troughton. And I'm praying they do that. So I would love to think that you would get on one of those box sets.
That would be great. I know Kieran, as his own project, is working on Celestial Toymaker, the existing episode of that. I've seen his work. It just looks absolutely gorgeous. And we have, spoken about, maybe looking at The Rescue or something like that, because that's a story that's maybe possibly sort of achievable. You could turn that into a nice sort of 50-minute colour edition, couldn't you? That'd be quite fun. It'd be like a William Hartnell version of a Peter Cushing movie. But yeah, we just have to see how it goes. We want to do things that are going to excite us as well, and kind of keep the momentum up, because it is quite tough work.
Well, I think the fandom are definitely behind you. Wouldn't you say so, Simon? And
I would say absolutely that. I think fandom, as much as we're difficult to please as Doctor Who fans, we are so. Dan and I have said this so many times before, that we're so well served as Doctor Who fans, more than any television show. We're very well served by so many people like yourself, Richard, that love the show. Yeah, we're very spoiled by people like yourself that want to do this stuff and put it out there in some form or another. And we are all eternally grateful for that. And so I think generally, the Doctor Who community will absolutely relish this in the way that they have done with the animations of the 60 series as well.
Say the word and we'll get the hashtag animate master plan going for you.
I really hope you get that phone call from the BBC. I'm banking on it.
Oh well, fingers crossed. That would be brilliant. But the community have been so nice, and we are, as you said, so lucky as a community. Really, like, I think maybe only perhaps Monty Python fans have the love put into their DVD releases that we do. People who make these documentaries and track down these directors and interview people who once played a jelly guard, and
Toby, he's talking about you, Toby.
They find, the people go above and beyond. There's some amazingly talented people in this community that do everything they can to just not just create something for a commercial release, but to do something, and make a work of art that they can put out there and have their own sort of little bit of ownership over. It's brilliant. I think it's great, and I love it when that really positive side of fandom is celebrated.
Well, from all of us at Type 40, the two of us and the other people who are involved, congratulations and thanks for joining us, Richard.
Oh, thanks, Dan.
We'd love you to come back and talk about some more projects, either this project or something that's to come, or just to talk about Doctor Who in general. But for now, why don't you leave us some of your contact details? Where can people interact with you on social media and reach out to see other projects that you may have or in the pipeline?
I think I've got a Facebook page somewhere. I might have even deleted it, but I'm Twitter mostly. Come and join me on Twitter. My handle is @farfromallover.
And your collective is known as Dr. Hugh, aren't you?
That's right. Yeah, that's my own work. I was quite happy with that. If you follow that, then you'll get all the updates on our colorization projects, because Justin, Scott, myself, and Kieran all sort of manage that account. Well,
I'm fascinated and impressed.
And I'm saluting you from where I'm sitting. It all looks so fantastic and exciting, and it brings a whole new lease of life to an era of Doctor Who that I absolutely adore. So thank you, sir. I salute you. Can't wait to see some more results.
Thanks, Si. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, back here for more Dalek talk, just to wrap up after our interview there. We're a couple of months on from that recording with Richard as we speak now, and obviously we've all been through lockdown and all those events where people could have had a chance to see the coloured Day of Armageddon. They just haven't come to pass. I'm positive that we'll get an opportunity somehow, someday. I know that Richard's all for that. But yeah, I think we've sort of whetted your appetite there with still images for long enough. Richard was happy for us to see some of the moving images too, to see all of their work sort of come to life more. So Simon, I thought we could hit play on the official, non-official trailer for the colour version of Day of Armageddon now, all together. So
I'm very excited because I haven't seen this at all as yet. So
you haven't seen this at all.
I'm looking for.
Gracious me, he was trying to get back to the TARDIS. In grave danger here. That's Mavic Chance. He's the ultimate head of the solar system. What's he doing here with the Daleks? No! You better pull yourself together. We've got some work to do. Got to take that spaceship. We're going to warn Earth. And this may be our only chance.
So
Yes.
it's spectacular, isn't it? For 30 seconds of 50-year-old footage, it's incredible what they've achieved. As somebody who, as we've spoken about earlier on in the intro, you've wanted to see this sort of thing happen for a long time, this colorization on this level. How does it make you feel to be able to watch just a snippet of it now?
Oh, it just makes me so excited because I just want to see the whole thing now. One of the things that actually converted me completely to colorization and got me really, really excited was a few years ago when Mind of Evil was recolorized. And to be honest, I'd always found the Mind of Evil a somewhat hard slog. I'd always found it a little bit, it was okay, it was John Pertwee, I liked it, but I always found it a little bit hard work. And I saw it in colour for the first time, obviously, and literally, suddenly, I loved it as a story, and I now do still love The Mind of Evil as a story. So the truth of it is, the colour really did take it onto the next level for me. So whilst I love all of the black and white stuff, the Troutman and the Hartnell stuff, to see it in colour, I just think really would again just take it onto another level and make it so much more enjoyable. And that's not again to denigrate the black and white version, which I still love. And I can't, something like, I don't know, The Web of Fear Part 1, I can't imagine ever seeing that in colour, because that absolutely is a black and white episode through and through and should remain almost a black and white episode. But there is other stuff, such as, I don't know, the Aztecs, that I would love to see in colour. The first Dalek story, so many of them. The Sensorites is probably always going to be best in black and white, although I don't know, maybe if you colorised it, make it a bit more watchable, I don't know. But this is why, to me, it's so exciting, because it's just, it's opening up whole swathes of Doctor Who to a new way of looking at them. You might like them better, you might not like them as much. That's not the point. The point is to experiment and try, and let's just feel around the issue and see where we can go with it.
There's something about the Daleks in black and white, isn't it? The steeliness, the texture of them. They do look great in black and white. The way the light sometimes catches them, the studio lights. But as an alternative version, exactly as Richard described, he talks about doing the domes, the hemispheres, and things like that. Oh, so painstaking. But those colours, they really, really pop. It's pure 1960s. It sort of brings it closer to when you do see toy Daleks from that time, it brings it a lot closer to that somehow, doesn't it? It just seems right. And if they had have gone on to make a third or even a fourth Dalek movie, my imagination does sometimes go there. But it does make you sort of wonder what they would have done with a plot like the Dalek Master Plan or the Chase or whatever, and how the colour schemes of Daleks, how that would have all evolved too. But in the texture of the show itself, particularly when you see the Daleks next to the human characters, done with such attention to detail, such care, I can't help. I was somebody who was always, as I've said before, so much more sceptical. But yeah, I would be next in line after you to pre-order that, or to go and see some sort of screening, some sort of premiere. I'm going to keep pestering you, Richard. As soon as you know the date, we'd like to be the next to know, please, if we may. We really must offer our gratitude to Richard and everybody again at Doctor Who for the fascinating conversation, of course, and these glorious sights. But that does wrap it up with us for now. Look out for more Type 40, of course, wherever you found this. It could have been on Apple Podcasts. If you search for the Fandom Podcast Network on Apple Podcasts, you'll find us, and you could maybe take a little extra time just to drop in a review there, because it does help new listeners find us that bit easier, a lot more than you think. We're also on iHeart Radio, Stitcher, Google Play, the Podbean app, and Spotify, which is my personal favourite, my weapon of choice. Anything you want to say to any of us, you can even contact us direct if you wish. Email type40doctorwho@gmail.com, Twitter and Instagram @type40doctorwho. There's that Facebook group and a Facebook page to match for real-time, extra-dimensional chit-chat. I am scattered throughout all of space and time, but mostly on Twitter as the Space Book, where I talk about all geeky things in movies, TV, comics, books, whatever catches my eye, my imagination, or both in popular culture. Or you can board the Spacebook's Facebook group, but you can find lots and lots of other geeks talking about pretty much the same from all over the world. Simon, where can people find you on social media?
They can find me on Facebook. That's where I spend a lot of time. So go and find me on Facebook, especially look under the Whonatics, WHONATICS, and they will find me there as one of the admins.
There you go. Admin in residence. It's been a pleasure, as always.
Indeed, sir.
Who next do you think, Simon? We'll have to keep that to ourselves for a little while, but watch the feed, watch the page, watch Instagram for announcements. We've got lots of exciting things already recorded, some of it. There's still so much to come before the end of our season 2. Thanks for watching or listening. Join us again next time here on Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast where we always have the time if you have the space.